said that I'd been betrayed by women my whole life. So this was just another incident of being betrayed by another woman, and I felt like I had.
Let's do this.
Yeah, some call this hip hop, I call this worship. I'm just serving my God, fulfilling purpose. You couldn't trust me, homie, I am worthless. Down on the ground, I was found where the dirt is. But my purpose is so much bigger. King bigger than anything that I could picture. Took me out the trap, no more trying to get richer. Gave your boy a gift of rap, but I only lean on scripture. He replacing the old me with this new guy. He keeps his promises, homie, he brings new light. Saying no to sin, Christians call it living right.
So tonight here with me I have my brother Fred Prasad. He's going to share a bit of his story, as I already mentioned. So Fred, just for the people watching, can you just tell us a bit about your childhood, where you're from?
I was born in New Zealand, and a lot of foreigners or Pacific Islanders were migrating to New Zealand at that specific time. And so I was born in New Zealand. My parents had just moved over from Fiji in the 80s, mid 80s, and so from there, I was born in a multicultural family, and my mother being Tongan and my dad being Fijian Indian. So there was obviously a new life, a new style of living, and so growing up, or where I was in a town in a suburb of South Central in Auckland, and at that time, that specific area was pretty big on gangs and the black power, and obviously I was just a little kid, so I didn't really have too much involvement in it. And you see movies and you see things and you hear of things as you're growing up that identify with what the town or the suburb was like as I was growing up. So, and a lot of the things as you're growing up and you see these things, there's one specific movie area, it wasn't really the safest place. Yeah. And it wasn't the best place. So as you can tell, a lot of Pacific Islanders tend to, when they migrate to a nation that has more wealth, they tend to go to a place that's more, cheaper cost of living and sort of easier way of life to bring up your kids, and even though it's better than what they had in the Pacific Islands. So
you mentioned there that your parents were Fiji, Indian and Tongan.
Yeah.
So what was it like growing up as a kid? As you said, you've come over, you're in South Auckland in Onehunga.
Yeah.
And so what was it like growing up as a mixed race kid, per se, in that area?
To be honest, I didn't. I guess I identified as a half caste, is what we'd call them, but moved to New Zealand. They had they had a daughter in Fiji and my sister, and then they had my second sister in New Zealand. But by the time I was born, my parents had split up, and obviously as a child, you're not aware of the situation and what things are going and what things are happening around you. And life is actually playing out, so you basically are given the hand that you're dealt, and you've basically just got to live with that. And so with my parents, I guess being a half caste, I knew that I was Tongan, or that I had Tongan in me, but I never identified as a Tongan until I started going to school. And my parents separated basically just after I was born. I think it was maybe a month. Growing up and knowing that my mum wasn't present in my life for that particular time, I had to go into school and being around people and different kids. Race wasn't an issue at that specific time. And it wasn't until I started getting picked on is that when I knew race has really got a part to play in this. Yeah. And how I respond to who I am as a person and what I would become is going to be identified in my culture or my ethnicity. So at that particular time, I'm a skinny guy, or I was fairly skinny as a kid, pretty tall, and a lot of people saw me as an Indian. Yeah. And my sisters were in the same school, but because they knew my sisters, and my sisters kind of had more of a sort of island look, they knew, okay, well, he's got some sort of island in him. Yeah. But it wasn't until people realized, he's actually got older sisters that they actually look Islander. And having to prove myself, the one thing that I found myself drawing towards was sports and athletics, because I had a natural ability and I had a gift, I guess, to be able to win people simply by my talent in sports. And you know, if you want to hang out with the cool kids, it's not on the books. You're not gonna get cool with staying in the library or trying to, you know, and that's what Indians are known for. You know, they I mean, unless you play cricket or something like that, your identity belongs in like books or maths, and that's basically what it was. That's what it was like. And so I didn't want to be that person. I wanted to be with the cool kids. I wanted to be sort of like, you know, hang out with the tough kids and have someone that has my back, as opposed to being the one that's, you know, give me your lunch and that kind of lifestyle. So I chased after the sports in school, and I was good at it. Yes, in high school, things really started to change. In New Zealand, you have what's called intermediate, so it's like middle school. And the primary school that I went to was a private school, so the transition to intermediate was different because I had no friends. So the whole search for identity and who I was again had to start all over again. But this time it was easier because you had specific things that you were good at, so you knew automatically you can draw towards or gravitate towards certain people automatically, just simply by seeing how people sort of hang out in the playground and things like that, and in the classroom. And so I in intermediate I met a guy, and his name just coincidentally was Fred as well, and we were both brand new to the school, didn't know anybody, and so we just kind of just, you know, got on like a house on fire. He's the guy that he was one that played basketball, and at that stage I didn't really play basketball. My sports were cricket, rugby and touch, and I used to do a lot of athletics, so long distance running, short distance running. And so I picked up a new sport, and I became good at that too, and I started to just, you know, move on with that as another sport, as another hobby, something that I enjoyed playing and something that I became good at too. So I went on to that, and I had to start again, but then from there it was a public school, and then from there I went to a high school that was also a public school, and that's when things started to, I guess at the end of the intermediate was when things started to really go downhill. I started to try and fit in now with the newer crowd, so older kids, older guys, and you know, they're in high school, I'm in intermediate, so basically I'm still in primary school. And these guys all have girlfriends, and you know, these guys are, you know, working part-time jobs, so they got money, and some of these guys are smoking cigarettes, and you know, as someone that didn't really know where they belonged or what they were searching for, you just did anything. You know, I got caught smoking at the age of 12, which was an intermediate, my last year, and I just didn't care. You know, until Dad found out, and then I cared. You know, and so it was like always trying to search for something and try and identify who I really was, and that process took so long because you go through all of life trying to find acceptance, but also trying to find your specific role in life. Like, where am I supposed to be? Where is my path going to take me? How am I supposed to fit in the mold of society? And so the society in those days and where I grew up, a lot of it was just Pacific Islanders growing up to, you know, just either just hang out on the streets late at night, smoke, drink, you know, and I guess you could say it was gang life, but it wasn't. You look at some of the gangs in New Zealand, and it's just fighting, like just brawls. That's the extent of gangs at that time anyway, unless it was like, you know, Black Power and all of that, but at that age, I mean, you're kidding, right? So we'd hang out on the streets a lot and just be getting involved in those kinds of things. But then moving on to high school, it just started to get worse, and I started drinking a lot more, like really, like heavily. And at 13, like, you know, you're not supposed to be doing that. You're supposed to be, you know, striving for the next goal in sports and things like that. And I relied so much on my natural ability that it was like my kryptonite, you know, relying, because I'm good at it naturally. So I have to put in work, but I don't have to put in as much work as the other guy, because I can just rock up and still be good at it. You know, and that was something that really hurt me. But in the whole avenue of going through all that I was going through, I ended up dating a girl, And at that point, I was like, oh, you know, this is cool. Like, this is nice. So I ended up losing my virginity at the age of 13, and only that same year to be betrayed by the same girl. And this is where the whole thing starts to spiral out, and I started to realize, once I got saved, which I'll get to, but realize how things really turned in my life, and just being betrayed by women constantly. First my mum, then, you know, dad's next girlfriend, then my first girlfriend, and then, you know, so on and so on. So I was constantly betrayed by women, which is what turned me into just a monster towards ladies, and not meaning that in a way that I would abuse them, but just use them for sexual purposes, and then be like, you know, that's it. So that was, I guess, the tail end of the whole way throughout high school. It was just kind of catered towards that: drinking, smoking, girls, drugs.
So you're getting towards, you mentioned you're getting towards the end of your high school years, and you're starting to get caught up in girls, a bit of drugs, light drugs, as you said. What's the progression here in your life?
That later part of the last year of high school really started to really look like it was going to work out for me, and I had trials to go to for, like, you know, certain teams and things like that. And the thing that constantly let me down was I would always rather be with the girls and drink on a Friday night than show up to the game on time. So I showing up to, I can remember 3 games off the top of my head where I rocked up after the game had started, ran to the changing rooms, got changed, got out onto the field, and my coach, he could just smell the alcohol off on me. And so he said the punishment at that time used to be, we're going to put you down to play with the second 15. And it was like demoralizing, because you don't want to play for the second 15. I'm too good to be playing there. I'm in the first 15, and this is where I belong. But he said, you know what, that's too good a punishment, because you still get to play. He said, I'm suspending you from playing for 2 weeks. I was just taken back, you know, like, why? Like, you know, it was just one game, come on. But, you know, if you do something wrong, there's consequences, and you have to pay those consequences. So I guess at the end of that year, I wanted to go back to school again and work and play another year at first 15, but I just couldn't do it. I couldn't bring myself to finishing high school, so I dropped out. That's where I started playing club rugby. I was playing under 19s for a club called Carlton Grammar, and it was good. You know, we made the finals one year and we lost it, and then that very next year I found out that the girl I was dating was pregnant, and by dating I meant the girl that I saw whenever I was, you know, on the prowl or something like that, you know, just being a dog, I suppose. And she told me that she was pregnant a couple months later, and I was just taken back. I'm 18 years old. I'm like, I just finished high school. Like, I just started my apprenticeship, and finishing high school, getting an apprenticeship, you kind of feel like, man, you know, life's going good. You know, I mean, you drink hard on Saturdays, and you worked hard for that money, so you play hard. And so I wasn't getting paid much. I think at that point I was like earning, for a 40-hour week, I was getting $250. So,
that's smart, doesn't it?
You know, now you look at it, it's like, fire out. I want to work for that for a day. You know, and so you look at those things, and you had things going for you. An apprenticeship was a really good thing, or even going to university. So I had things lined up that were really helping me out in life, that was going to send me on a good path. And, you know, it was only the alcohol and that was going to really destroy my life. And but once I found out that this girl was pregnant, I kind of just thought, I've got to hold off on everything. I've got to just focus on working. But I took to drugs even more, because I just didn't want to feel the reality of it. And so she gave birth to this young girl, and I was just like, man, you know, what is going on? And afterwards, it was after the fact that I found out she wasn't mine. But it was almost like it was too late. Like, you'd been lured into a relationship that you didn't want to be in the first place. Now, how do I get out of this? There's a child involved now, so how am I supposed to just get out of this? And so I thought, okay, well, we'll just make the relationship work, and we'll just, you know, stick it out. And then I found out, you know, she wasn't mine, but the young girls already started to call me dad at that stage too. So I'm just like, far out. So I was just like, you know what? I'll just be a good man to this young girl and just raise her. At 19, so that was 2008. No, it was 2009 and 2008. So that's when the girl was born. In 2009 is when she was pregnant again, but this time it was mine. So it was almost like, now I was like, flip, this is catch-22. I'm like, I'm definitely stuck now. There's no point of retrieving now. So I've got to go in. I'm committed now. This is it. And so, you know, I don't regret my son being born at all. You know, he's 10 years old now, and he's a beautiful young boy. He's healthy. He lives without regret ever having him at all. But at that point, I just felt trapped. I felt like there's no point of return now. I'm in this for the long haul, and I got to do it. And you know, I did it for as long as I could, and I would always run away on the weekends. Never. If I was out on a weekend, it was always to get some. I always wanted to hook up with girls and try and just be someone that can just score on a regular basis, because I didn't care about her feelings. I didn't care about what she was going through or anything like that. And if I can rewind again to when I said, excuse me, when I said that I'd been betrayed by women my whole life. Yeah. So this was just another incident of being betrayed by another woman, and I felt like I had enough. You know, I'm done with this. So my way of taking revenge was just sleep around with, you know, whichever woman I could score on the night, and that was it. And I didn't care if she got hurt. And you know, there were instances where she found my phone and she'd be like, "Oh, who's this?" And you know, I used to store girls' numbers on there, like guys' names, like my mates' names, and just be like, you know, "Why are you texting John like this?" And it's like, "Oh, nah, he was texting his
the boys, you know."
You know, and it was you kind of just made up excuses, and it happened so often that she realized that there's something else, and I just said, "So what do you want me to say?" Yeah. It's like, you know, and so that's when the whole thing started spiraling out of control. I was in a relationship that I didn't want to be in, and I just wanted to get out, but I didn't know how. I was so unfaithful, and I knew that I could never be faithful to another woman ever. Yeah. Like this is it. This is what. It got to a point. I went out one night with the boys, and I just absolutely had it. And we went out one night to the city there in Auckland, and I was just wasted. I didn't feel like going out to town that night. The boys were like, "Come on, man!" Just once, one of our mates just came back from Australia, and he was there in Auckland as well. So we were just sitting down playing cards, having a few beers, and I just didn't feel like getting hammered that night. So they persuaded me, and I thought, okay, let's do it. But I said, I have to be drunk before we go. Yeah. So they're like, sweet. So my mate went into his dad's cupboard, grabbed out some top shelf, and we were just, you know, going hard on the Canadian club. And before I knew it, we're in the taxi going to town, and I can't even remember the point from when I started sculling the bottle to when we got in the cab, and then we end up in the city, and now I'm in the club, and the next thing I know, I'm waking up in a hospital bed. Oh wow! You know, and I get up, and I'm like, what's going on? Where's the boys? So I make some phone calls and stuff, and finally, you know, my family get a hold of what's going on, and my sister, my older sister, she was living in Australia at the time. Somehow, some way, she found out that I was in hospital, and she called me and said, you know, you need to move over to Australia. You need to come here, and you need to start again. You need to start fresh and just and do something different with your life. And I just thought at that point, I didn't feel like doing that. I thought, you know what, if I'm going to die on the streets over here, getting drunk, getting beat up, well, that's just my life. Who cares? I'll die on the streets. You know, I had nothing to lose. I didn't have much to gain. Yeah. So I didn't really care about living or dying either way. If I went out one night and got into a car accident, well, too bad. And it's a selfish way of thinking now that I look at it, because, you know, it's not just me that's losing life. All my family's losing life too. Yeah. They're losing someone that's dear to them, and I never saw it in that way before. So I think throughout all of that, it kind of got me to think, and I remember pride playing a very big part of me making that decision. Yeah.
You mentioned that night. So how long after that, because obviously your change standing before us, how long after that, what was the changing point? What was this is it, something has to change in my life, something's got to give, because right now my environment around me isn't helping me.
So at that point in time, my sister and my dad had come up with a proposition. So they convinced me. They said, look, we'll pay for your flight. as long as you come over. And I said, I'll only come over with one thing in mind. And I said, if I don't like it there, I'm moving back and you're paying for my ticket back.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I don't want to come to your church. So I said, I knew what her church was about and I knew what she was involved in. And I said, you know, your church, you found God, whatever it is that you've got it. I'm happy for you. But I said, as soon as I get on my feet when I come over there, and if I do like it, I'm out. Don't try and force me into your church. I don't want anything to do with it. You know, I'm happy with the way my life is. And because I tried it once or twice before and it didn't work out. So I thought, nah, I don't want to have anything to do with that. So anyway, I moved over here in 2012. In 2012, yeah, and I got in on a Saturday, and my dad came with me.
Yep.
And just out of respect, I knew I had to do it. My sister said, "Get up, get ready, we're going to church," and I was just like, "Shut the F up, you know, like get out of my room and just leave me alone. I want to sleep." Talking about respect. But I guess I had enough respect to listen and get up anyway. And I went to church and you know, for me it was just like, yeah, I've heard these things before, the pastor preach, and I've heard this whole thing, and I was just like, I just don't want anything to do with it, you know. I rocked up in like my Derrick Rose basketball shoes, baggy jeans, long tee, hair corn braided, and I was just like, I was out of place. I walked into the church and I just felt like I don't belong here. Like, look at everybody and look at me.
Yeah.
I don't fit in here. I stick out like a sore thumb, you know. And so that's how I felt a lot of times coming to church, and I would go week after week, and you know, just there was nothing else to do. So hey, why not? I'll just go anyway. I mean, I get to talk to people and I get to have free food every now and then. So if anyone can convince me, it's with food. So
yeah.
So that was, I guess, the draw card. But it wasn't until one morning, I remember a couple of guys from the church had put this plan together to have a fellowship, basically just a gathering of you know, young guys just hang out. And it was actually Pastor Ash, who was the pastor of this church, who pioneered the Caboolture church, and he church had put this plan together to have a fellowship, basically just a gathering of you know, young guys just hang out. And it was actually Pastor Ash, who was the pastor of this church, who pioneered the Caboolture church. He set this whole thing up, and there was a whole bunch of guys that weren't working on a specific Monday, and I was like, man, what are these guys like? How can everybody have the day off on Monday? Yeah. So anyway, they all had the day off, and they invited me over. One of the brothers picked me up, and we went over there, and for the first time, I guess I saw such a unity and such fun, and I saw these Christian guys having like laughing without having to take drugs or without having to drink. It was like they could just enjoy each other's company without the alcohol and the things that I'm usually able to enjoy company. You know, like I can have a good time when I'm drinking and enjoy everybody's company around me. And so none of these guys had that. None of these guys needed that. Yeah. And I was just stunned by it. And so that night I went home and I was just telling my sister, I was like, man, these guys are really different, eh? Like there's just I don't know what it is, but these guys are so different to what I know, what I'm used to knowing about people, especially Pacific Islanders. And it was that night that there was a revival meeting in Strathpine. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to go on my own. I'm not going to depend on my sister to take me or to jump in with her. I'll drive down myself. So I drove down, and it was there that night that I heard the pastor preach. And I remember from the beginning of the service, I didn't listen to a word he said. Yeah. All I was waiting for was the altar call, because I knew I wanted to get saved. Yeah. And it was at that moment that I realized everything that I had done in life, everything that I'd been searching for, that identity that I was trying to locate, who was I, who is Fred Prasad, that really came that night. Wow. And it wasn't like a whole flooding thing that, you know, oh yeah, this is who you are, this is your purpose, this is where I want you to be. But it was like, this was right then and right there was what God had ordained for my life, and it was to get saved, to live for Him and receive salvation. And I knew about it. I grew up with a religious background. I went to a Catholic private school when I was on my first school. And so I knew about it, I knew of God, and I believed in God. I just didn't have a relationship, and I didn't know how to get saved, or I didn't know what the Bible meant. So throughout that time, it was very, very evident to me what I needed to do. And so I really did that day find my identity in Jesus Christ. But it was from that point on that I had to start forging it and start to really hone in on the purpose of that identity now.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So you've come to Australia, you've gotten saved, you've accepted Jesus as your Lord and Saviour. How is your life different now? How does your life unfold from here? Yeah.
Well, from that point on, I think people around me and the church really did get alongside of me. And they really did. People that just would persistently like check up on me, see how I was doing, and it wasn't because they had any gain. And I mean, you could tell from the start.
Yeah.
What gain do they have from me benefiting in life? Like, what are they going to get from it? Nothing.
Yeah.
So they really did have my best interest at heart. And so I realized that, and I started seeing that. And a lot of the things that I was used to in life and with people, dealing with people, it wasn't like that. Yeah. It was different. And why was it different? These people had something to offer, but nothing to gain. That's why it was different. They weren't looking out for themselves. They were looking out for me, and that was it. And so from there, I remember everything that I would do, it was because someone else would help me get there. Yeah. And so as I was walking the path in salvation, I got taught how to pray. I got taught how to give in offerings and tithing. I got taught how to speak properly. I mean, it's a miracle that I could sit here today and speak the way I'm speaking, because my vocabulary was very limited in the way I would think and the way I would speak and what I would say. And so everything leading up to that point of salvation and being able to get to where I am today was simply because God had done a work in my life. And by that I really genuinely mean that He was able to comfort me in times when I was going through things. And at the beginning stages of salvation, it was very hard. Yeah. I think I hit a crossroads when I was about 3 or 4 months saved, and I mentioned I had a son. Yeah. I left him back in New Zealand, and that was a huge thing for me, because I remember thinking, my dad paid the price for me to be able to be raised in a house, and he was the one who went after me and wanted to raise me. And so I thought from the beginning, that's what I want. Yeah. And so I remember just really clearly knuckling down in prayer and just saying, God, You've got to make a way for this. I really want to raise my son. I want him here, and I want him to be in a godly house. Yeah. And from that point on, I think it took about 1.5 years before it actually happened. But before that, I got married, and I married my pastor's daughter, which is you can't look at that and it's a bit scary when I was going through it at the time, and I was like, whoa, this can't be happening. She's the pastor's daughter. But got into a relationship, and I really did genuinely think that I was never going to be faithful to another woman again. And throughout that time, I remember praying and fasting and saying to God, I'm not sure about how this is going to happen. Yeah, I'm filthy. I'm dirty. Like, women to me, they're a tool. Like, how do I overcome this? And day by day, He was always comforting me. He was always helping me, and He was setting me down the path that was leading me and setting me up for marriage. And in 2013 in August, my wife and I got married, Haley, and from then on I started building a solid relationship. Foundations were starting to get laid for me, and I was just able to build on the real truths and foundations of what Jesus Christ was really about: people, prayer, and unity. And those are things for me that were really that really stuck out, and especially in the church that I was saved in. Everybody had each other's back. Yeah. I mean, you were one of my brothers that really did help me throughout that period of time, and we had each other's backs. That's just what it was like. And so the whole way through now and coming to this point of where I am today, it's only because of God's grace. Yeah. I mean, I still mess up now. I'm in the middle of a crossroads right now, and right now is the the perfect time to be able to share that, you know, while I'm going through such turmoil in my own personal life, God's been walking with me. Even though I've doubted him, he never leaves me.
Wow.
And that's the most powerful thing is it's like a man with a dog. He always, when he comes home, the dog's always the first person to run up to his owner. And, you know, I'm not a dog person, but my father-in-law is. So, you know, I can I see that. And so with God, it's completely different. It's not when you come home. It's 24/7. It's 24 hours around the clock. God's by your side. Whenever you're going through something, God's there. And it may be in little ways, in small ways that I may not even be able to see it. But when I'm going through something and he sees that, he still reaches down. Yeah. So, you know, I think throughout all of Christianity, I've been saved for 8 years now, or this June I'll be saved for 8 years, and just seeing and knowing what God has done in my life, I know that there's no turning back. There's no going back from this and retrieving, because he gave me purpose. He showed me my identity. Even though now I may be struggling, I remember my identity back then, and that's why it's not as hard to get back up on and get the ball rolling again.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you sharing your testimony and your story. Who would agree that's a real story? That was a real privilege to listen to. But I just, before we wrap this up, what's something that you would want to leave with anyone who would watch this about if they were in a similar situation to you? What's something that you would just want to leave with them, just to, I guess, encourage them or give them some hope?
Well, I guess someone that's in a similar position as me, you know, stop running.
Yeah.
Because that's something that someone's searching for who they are. They really start running away from what could possibly help them and start running towards other identities and trying to, you know, it's like me seeing a pair of shoes outside of someone's house and jumping in their shoes hoping that I can become like them because their life seems like it's all together. And so we'd run away from that. So my advice would be, don't run away from the good things that could come from this. Yeah. Find a church, and you know, I really hope that this would help anybody that's fighting their identity or trying to find their identity, is come along to church.
Yeah.
Because if you give this a go, God will give you a go, and he'll show you and prove to you exactly who you are.
Yeah.
And you know, with that, you'll never go wrong. Yeah. And is it hard? Absolutely. Mm. I will not take that away from Christianity one bit, but I mean, life is hard.
Yeah.
How do you go through life without going through turmoil? The difference when we go through turmoil is we've got a God to turn to.
Yeah.
And he's always faithful. You know, yeah, he might make us wait a little bit, but we have to wait in the real world too, whether we don't have Christ in our life or not. So if you're out there and you're searching for an identity, I'm telling you, it's only found in Christ. There's no other way. And don't wait too long, because before you know it, life's over.
Yeah. No. I appreciate that again, Fred. I really do appreciate you sharing your story. Again, just to reiterate what my brother Fred said here, is that in this world, it has so many different paths, so many different ideas of what you're meant to be. It tells you you're meant to be like this person, and you're meant to be like Mike. It was that old song, but the most important thing that you can be is be the person that God created you to be. If you're looking for identity, your identity is found in Christ. As Christians, we have that confidence that God has us. He has our back. He has gone before us, and then He will correct our paths. He'll lead us into what He has called for us. I just want to encourage you, look for a local church. You're more than welcome to come to our church once this whole COVID-19 thing's done. But God bless. Thank you for coming. Thank you for tuning in. Again, like and subscribe if you haven't already. We really do appreciate the support. God bless, and this was Throwback Thursdays. Amen.
We gotta trust Him now. You know what I'm saying? Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. That means trust Him, homie. Die to yourself. Rise with the King for eternity, forever. You know what I'm saying? Let's do this. Yeah. Some call this hip hop, I call this worship. I'm just serving my God, fulfilling purpose. You couldn't trust me, homie, I am worthless. Down on the ground, I was found where the dirt is. But my purpose is so much bigger. King bigger than anything that I could picture. Took me out the trap, no more trying to get richer. Gave your boy